Hello, I'm Julie Laing. I am the author of the Twice as Tasty Food blog and also the Complete Guide to Pickling. And today I'm going to show you how to make some refrigerator pickles. These are a basic refrigerator pickle recipe, but this recipe is a version that is in my cookbook for some pickled asparagus spears, which is what we have here today. So things have already been pre-prepped, but what we're going to do is we're going to take our asparagus and we're going to start by putting it into our jars. A nice tall 24-ounce jar is really helpful when you're doing asparagus, so you can keep your spears long. Even then, you want to cut them so that they're about 3/4 of an inch below the rim of the jar so that they're going to be submerged in their brine. We're going to pack our asparagus spears all into the jar here. These are raw, uncooked, so they're really quite easy to get into place. And we're going to fill up our jar. As we go, we're going to add our flavorings and seasonings that we're going to put in there. One of those is going to be a little slice of lemon. Slide that down on the side here. And we're also going to put in a clove of garlic. Since these are refrigerator pickles, we can put in these larger pieces of garlic and things because we're going to let them sit in the refrigerator for 1 to 3 days before they eat them, so they'll develop that really nice garlic flavor. And then we're going to slide all of these in here. The other thing that we are going to add to the mix is a little bit of spice. This is a dilly spice blend. The recipe that I use is already in my book, but you can use whatever favorite one you do when you make any of your dill pickles. It's got a little bit of coriander, mustard seed, dill, black pepper, chili, some bay leaf, and we're going to put in about a teaspoon of that for this size of a jar. And this is a little bit more than we need, so we're probably just going to pour in a little section of it. You want to make sure you get a nice variety of your spices in there. And so we end up with those down toward the bottom. That'll let us put in the rest of our asparagus spears and kind of keep some of those spices and things down at the end. Now your garlic clove, of course, is going to want to get in the way, shorten things up a little bit. If that happens, you can redo them, pull him out down there and shift him around so he gets a little more room in there. Shove in our asparagus spears, make sure we got them short enough. The other option, bring it out, snap off the end, put in the short one on top of the garlic. So we'll pack as many of these guys as we can in here. It will take, in this size of a jar, about 8 ounces of asparagus. Flow them all in here. These guys are going to fit, and voila, we're going to have our packed jar ready for our asparagus brine. That's our next step. We're going to head to the stove. So we're on our second step of making our refrigerated asparagus pickles. We've got our pickles and our asparagus. We've packed them in the jar. Now we're going to make our brine. And when you make your brine, for most pickles, it's safest and easiest to just do a 1 part brine, 1 part water, which is what we've got in here. Non-chlorinated water is going to make better pickles for sure. If you have heavy chlorine in your water or don't know what's in your water, buy some distilled water. You'll get a much crispier, crunchier pickle. And then we're going to put in some white wine vinegar. And we're going to put that into the same amount. So I added 3/4 of a cup of water here. So I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of the wine vinegar. This is 5% acidity wine vinegar, which is what you're looking for when you're canning. Most canning, pickling, other recipes are going to call for a 5% acidity vinegar, so you get the right balance of ratio. So even if you're not processing in a canner and just making refrigerator pickles, good choice is to buy 5% acidity or higher. So we're going to get this guy fired up and start heating up our brine. We're going to bring this brine to a full boil. Part of the reason we're going to do that is we're going to put in some sugar and we're going to put in some salt. And the heat will help those dissolve a little bit better. I'm going to run a tablespoon of sugar in here. I'm using raw sugar, but you can use any kind of sugar you want. Know that if you use like a brown sugar or something, it's probably going to have a little bit of a flavor in there. I've also got 1/2 teaspoon of salt that's going in here. I'm using pickling salt today. This is the Morton canning and pickling salt. And it's going to dissolve pretty quickly within our water here, but we're going to have our best effect if we heat up this brine. We're here with our brine and we're going to stir this up and we're going to heat it up until this dissolves. Once we've got it dissolved in there, The other reason we're heating our brine is asparagus is a really kind of a tough, thick vegetable. So if we put the hot brine over it, the pickling happens faster and better. It's a little bit different from if you're pickling cucumbers, which are super watery and have a hard time staying crisp. And so in that case, we want a brine that's cool. We would perhaps heat the brine if we want to dissolve things into it, but we would then let it cool off so that we could put it over our cucumbers and not make them all soft and mushy. And we've already got it dissolved. It's already there. We're just going to let this brine heat up, and then we'll be ready to pour it over the top of our pickles. Now that we've got our hot brine, I've poured it into a measuring cup so it's easier to get into my jar. You could also ladle it from your pot, but we're just going to pour the brine over the asparagus. So you can see it's still pretty hot and steamy so that it'll pickle those asparagus faster. And we're going to pour it all the way in here until we come over the top of the asparagus. Now, as you can see, we've got a couple of asparagus that are sitting out a little bit. We've got a couple that have bobbed up a little bit. If you need to top off the brine, you can always do it with a little bit of extra vinegar, which is just go straight from the jar. It's okay to have that much splash of extra vinegar in there. Our asparagus are also starting to float, which is part of the reason that we're having a challenge with keeping them down under the rim. So to counter that while they're pickling, I'm going to take a piece of paper towel here, fold it up, and it's going to act as a weight that just comes right on top of the pickles in the jar. It's going to weigh them down under the brine there while they're pickling. We're going to screw on a non-reactive lid. This really means anything that's not going to react with the vinegar. So plastic, stainless steel, whatever lids, work with our glass jar. This is a nice plastic one. It can handle the heat. The jar is going to be still quite warm, so we're going to leave it at room temperature for 30 minutes till it cools down. Once it cools down, you can pull out that paper towel, stick it in the fridge, let it sit for 24 hours to maybe 3 days before you eat your pickles, and they will keep for several months in the refrigerator, just like this. Thanks.